She was innocent. She couldn't defend herself. She was 5 years old. What could Mercedes do? Nothing. How can she allow for this man to come and abuse her daughter?
He would spank them. He would pull Mercedes' hair and cover her mouth and nose. Use thumbtacks on her feet.
Literally from head to toe, there was trauma, front and back.
Lots of tears shed over this case. It was a very hard process.
The story is one many will never forget. The last 3 weeks of life for 5-year-old Mercedes Losoya in 2022 were something no person should have to go through, more or less a child. The extreme physical abuse at the hands of Mercedes' mother, Katrina Mendoza, and her boyfriend, Jose Ruiz. Once Ruiz's case went to trial, more unimaginable details revealed. We do want to warn you, in this case are details that are disturbing and hard to hear. Five-year-old Mercedes Losoya and her older sister Jordan were the best of friends. Family described them as inseparable, and they loved to get dressed up and be around family.
She was very friendly, very playful. She always wanted to be around her cousins, her sissy. She just was very, very caring.
Emily Losoya recalls the love she had for her nieces and the joy Mercedes was to have around. Lorraine Martinez has many memories of her granddaughter.
She would tell me, Chama. I said, yes, I love you with all my heart. And then she would blink her eye. She would go like that, she would blink her eye. I love you too, Mercedes.
Mercedes and her sister lived with their mother, Katrina Mendoza. Katrina, a young mom, had the girls in her teens and had many struggles herself growing up. Katrina's own mother had been arrested and charged with beating her brother. Katrina lived off and on with other relatives or her godparents. When she met Lorraine's son, the two at first were happy, but the relationship ended badly. Lorraine and Emily kept in touch with Katrina to make sure they could still see the girls, and were also there if she needed a place to stay or to help in any way.
Many times I had told Katrina, you're always going to be welcome here at my house.
One thing they did eventually notice was how Katrina treated the girls differently and always favored her oldest, Jordan, over Mercedes.
She would just show Jordan, like, I missed you, I love you, mommy's gonna pick you up later, da da da. And Mercedes would just be like, what about me?
In November 2021, they noticed a difference in Mercedes. Around the same time, Katrina started dating a man by the name of Jose Ruiz. Ruiz and Mendoza met at a strip club she was working in at the time. The week of Thanksgiving, the girls were staying with Lorraine when abruptly Katrina and Jose came to pick them up.
And I told her, I even cried outside, Katrina, let me have the girls. Let them stay here tomorrow's dance. Not because of the honor of my mom. I need to take the girls, and never saw Mercedes again.
On February 7, 2022, Katrina Mendoza ran into a Southside San Antonio hospital with an unconscious Mercedes. Staff immediately took her and began working on her, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead minutes later. What happened to Mercedes? How did a 5-year-old girl who was so loved end up dead? But it wasn't hard for medical staff and investigators to see that Mercedes had suffered. Days later, Katrina Mendoza and Jose Ruiz were arrested and charged with injury to a child. The arrest affidavit revealed shocking details. The detective on the case said, quote, visible bruises, scratches, cuts, and swelling on almost every visible part of her body, and that she suffered extreme physical abuse and torture for several weeks. It would be 2 days after Mercedes' death that Lorraine and Emily were told what happened.
She was innocent. She couldn't defend herself. She was 5 years old. What could Mercedes do? Nothing. How can she allow for this man to come and abuse her daughter?
They knew something was wrong when they couldn't find the girls or Katrina. Emily admitting to calling Child Protective Services multiple times after Katrina took the girls.
She already had a case open. Why didn't they do their job?
The case was now in the hands of former Bexar County prosecutor Marissa Giovenco.
This was a very hard case for me to see the first time. And the second time, and every time. But the first time was the hardest. Lots of tears shed over this case. It was a very hard process.
Marissa would get the case indicted fairly quickly. They were each facing 13 counts. Along with Marissa, later Brittany Mitchell was assigned the case, as well as Alexandra Jackson.
It was very clear he was not going to take anything. So we kind of were in that trial mode pretty early on with him.
With Jose, it's always about him. He's always the victim.
But as for Katrina, she took responsibility, and she wanted to testify against Jose and wanted a plea deal. So the woman got ready for trial, and more than 2 years after Mercedes died, a trial would take place for Ruiz. And while those involved in the case knew the specifics, nobody else was prepared for just how this case would go and the awful images that would be shown. Day one of trial, Marissa delivered opening arguments laying out the case to the jury.
In this case, you're going to have to see things that nobody should ever have to see. Let alone things that a child at the age of 5 should have to endure.
She went on to detail how Mercedes' sister Jordan had a front row seat to everything that happened. Katrina and the girls, a day before Mercedes died, had moved out of Jose's apartment and were living with a friend, but in the same complex.
Jordan said that day that her mother was, Jordan's word, jamming food down Mercedes' mouth. Mercedes kept spitting it up. She was being gorged, she kept spitting it up. Katrina got mad, according to Jordan's statement. I wasn't there. And she said she jammed the spoon down her throat. At that point, Mercedes, who had been on a chair, fell off the chair.
According to Jordan, Katrina took Mercedes to Jose, who tried to give her CPR, and then they went to the hospital. The first witness to be called up was the ER nurse who tried to help Mercedes.
She had mashed bananas in her mouth, which we had to take out. I placed her in room 12 directly behind them. Child was pulseless. CPR begun immediately. Several rounds of high-quality CPR and BVM assisted ventilations were given. Patient never regained ROSC, which is return of spontaneous circulation when we get a pulse back. And the code was called, meaning time of death was called. Dr. Newton called time of death at 1918.
When he got a closer look at Mercedes, he noticed injuries all over.
Child was noticed to have generalized bruising over body, posteriorly and anteriorly, along with scratches, missing areas of hair on head, wounds to her feet, and toenails missing on 2 toes of the left foot, and generalized bruising was noticed on patient's body. Bruising in different stages of healing. There were newer bruises on her. I don't recall exactly whether, but there were some that were darker than others. Literally from head to toe, there was trauma, front and back.
SAPD and Child Protective Services were then called. Former SAPD officer Ryan Cahill was the first to the hospital, and he described what he saw.
She was covered from head to toe, her whole body in bruises, significant bruising.
He spoke to Katrina at the hospital, who was visibly agitated. He said Katrina called Jose and was yelling at him through the phone. Officers then found Jose in the hospital parking lot in his car. They approached him and asked him what happened.
I don't know, she was fine. After that all passed, she was fine. And then out of nowhere, she's laying on her side and she's just throwing up constantly.
Right. And based on your training and experience, was what he told you consistent with Mercedes' condition and how you saw her?
No, it was not.
Police became concerned about the whereabouts of Mercedes' sister, Jordan, and her condition. When she was found, she not only was well, but had no signs of physical abuse. Former CPS investigator Julie Rummel told the jury that she was the one to have to tell Jordan her sister had passed.
She came and gave me a big hug and, mentioned something that her sissy was no longer in pain and walking the golden streets.
Jordan would be the one to paint the picture to investigators just how bad it was for Mercedes.
I
then a man started putting thumbtacks in her feet. She was in the closet.
Okay.
And then she peed on herself, and then Jose said, make the pee, and then keep licking it and sleep there. And then Jose started putting thumbtacks. Last time, Jose hit in my sister's mouth and slapped her, and these two teeth came out.
CPS revealed on the stand that a month before Mercedes died, they had stopped by after a call was made to check on the girls. They said at the time they didn't believe anything was wrong. On day 2 of the trial, video from inside Jose's apartment was shown. Thumbtacks were on the ground and wall. Cleaning supplies were out. Clumps of hair in several locations. Audio of Ruiz's interview with police was then played. He denied doing anything wrong at first, and the only discipline was making them stand in the corner. The lead detective on the case, Lawrence Sines, said Ruiz then talked about his own abusive childhood, how his mom remarried after his father was sent to prison for raping a child. He described his stepfather making him hold up weights for long periods of time. He then described his relationship with Katrina and the girls and how Jordan was favored.
Mercedes was bad. Jordan was good.
When the detectives questioned injuries on Mercedes,
When I first saw Mercedes in that fight, somebody, some devil has been abusing and torturing this little girl. You can explain to me how this got so out of hand, so out of control. That was not my fault. What would you do to discipline Mercedes? There's more than what you just told me. You told me some of it. Tell me all of it. You would pinch her, okay? What else would you do? That's it. That hair missing was her little sister.
Later, 911 calls were heard. Neighbors who lived around Ruiz's apartment had been calling police for 2 months, reporting hearing a child crying in pain.
The neighbors upstairs, I think they're severely beating their kid up.
SAPD only went by once, but didn't go inside the apartment. Day 3 of the trial would be by far the most disturbing. Not only would Katrina Mendoza finally take the stand, but it was revealed that Jose had recorded videos and taken photos on his phone of the abuse being done to Mercedes. Midway through the trial, the case was getting emotionally taxing for those involved as well as for the jury. But for prosecutors, they knew Katrina's testimony, along with photos and video of Mercedes, would be all they needed to convict Jose. Katrina was called to the stand. When she was asked about the day Mercedes died, she couldn't remember and even laughed about mixing up the days.
There you go, February 7th. Sorry.
She talked about her relationship with her daughters.
Did you favor Jordan over Mercedes?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that?
Because she was my firstborn.
She went on to say she had trouble bonding with Mercedes, and then she described a day she called Jose, saying she was having trouble with Mercedes and that Jose picked her up so he could discipline her. Photos from Jose's phone were then shown. One photo, Mercedes with bruising all over her face with a swollen mouth and teeth missing. Another of her standing with patches of missing hair. And a photo of her feet, a screenshot from the Ring camera in the closet. You could see her little feet trying to stand on multiple thumbtacks. And a gasp from jurors and those in the courtroom of Mercedes' face smeared with the feces of Jose's dogs. A video was then playing that Ruiz had recorded. It was from the night he picked up Mercedes. You see her in the backseat of his car holding a heavy jug over her head, crying and telling him it was too heavy.
No, it's not. It's not even heavy at all. Nothing. Pick it up. Yeah, I know. It is full. Pick it up. Pick it up.
Family walked out as the video was played. Jurors could be seen grabbing tissues and crying. The prosecutors deciding it was enough and not showing other photos and videos on his phone.
It's bad enough to see everything they had to see. We didn't want to make them see it multiple times.
Katrina herself describing the abuse she allowed to happen.
He would pull her hair. He would spank her with the belt. He would use the metal part of the belt. He would hold her breath by covering her mouth and her nose. He would pull her hair out. He would not let her eat certain foods or have a certain drink. He would keep her standing up for hours at a time. He would sleep deprive her.
She even described an instance where Jose had wrapped a pole around Mercedes' arms and made her stand for hours in a crucifixion pose. Katrina ending her testimony saying she knew she had done wrong.
I should have made better choices.
The next day, the medical examiner ruled that Mercedes had fractures on her spine from overextension, which matched up to being tied up to a pole for long periods of time. Internally, Mercedes' kidneys were failing and her death was caused by rhabdomyolysis, which is the breakdown of muscles from trauma and exertion. On day 5, the state rested, and after a couple of recall witnesses for the defense, they rested as well. In closing, the defense put all the blame on Katrina, saying she was the abuser and the proof was in all the records CPS had against her. But Brittany had a strong closing.
We don't know everything, but we know that he hit that little girl. Again and again. And that little girl cried out for help, and unfortunately, she didn't get that help. But we're not here. CPS is not on trial. Police are not on trial. Jose Ruiz is on trial. Him and Katrina worked together in making that little girl's life hell the last 2 weeks. And we ask, just like defense said, let's vindicate her. Please find Jose Ruiz guilty of all counts.
In less than an hour, the jury came back and did just that.
Defendant will please rise. It states, count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jose Ruiz, guilty of the offense of injury to a child.
Later, that same jury deliberated for about 30 minutes and then sentenced him to life in prison, a relief for family and the prosecutors.
For me personally, I'll say that there's been other cases that were horrendous, but to me, this was the worst, and that is why it really meant a lot for me.
A few weeks later, Katrina was given the maximum sentence per the plea deal, 45 years in prison. She broke down and cried as the girl's great-grandmother read statements that had been made by Mercedes' sister, Jordan.
I wonder why my mommy allowed this to happen to my sister. Grandma, I cannot sleep at night because I see my sissy being tortured. Not using that word, but being hurt, being hit. Grandma, I don't understand why we didn't leave Jose. Grandma, I am so afraid that my mom will come one day and take me back to Jose's house. Grandma, I love my mommy, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day she will come and something might happen to me like my sissy. Grandma, please, Grandma, don't let them take me away. I want to stay with you. Grandma, I do love my mommy, and I do pray for her, and she does, Katrina. Grandmas, I have been told in school, or I have been told by other children, is your mama a killer? And she killed my sissy? How has it impacted Jordan? This is hard, and it will affect her for the rest of her life, because you are a mother.
Life after the trial for Lorraine and Emily hasn't been easy. They still wonder what if, and if they could have done more. In her home, Lorraine has an area that is full of photos of the girls, and there sits Mercedes' ashes.
And I would never forgive him or her, ever. And I hope they really pay what they did to Mercedes.
Will there ever be justice for Mercedes?
No.
I don't think so. I mean, they get to live in prison, and she doesn't get to be here with us or to live her life.
As for Mercedes' memory, she will always, forever be remembered.
I will always remember Mercedes.
Always. She was a fighter.
Yeah. Mercedes was a fighter.
And if she is anything like Jordan, she would have been amazing.
She might not be here with us, but in my heart, she's always going to be in my heart.
A smile we will never forget. Thanks for joining us. For more on this episode and other past Texas crime stories, just head to our website, ksat.com, or our streaming platform, KSAT+.